Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 32 of the Golden Question podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be answering the question, what is the case for scalpers? Now, scalpers are people who resell something and resell it for a much higher price than the actual stated price of that good or service provided by the manufacturer directly. Now, obviously, they're seen in a negative light. They're seen as taking advantage of those who really want the console and overcharge for the good or service, overcharge for the value that it actually is. And they assume that the value that the manufacturer provides is the value of that thing that they're selling. Now, this is in relation to the release of the PS5, which came out just a couple days ago. And so a lot of people are getting mad at scalpers who are charging the PS5 for they're charging upwards of 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 bucks, while the actual console released by PlayStation for MSRP is just around 500. So they're in some cases more than doubling the price. And so a lot of people are seeing this as a negative thing, right? And so I'm going to argue for scalpers and why I think that they are necessary in a economy. I mean, first of all, right, we have certain freedoms in our economy, thankfully. And so, there isn't anybody who's making this illegal. But, in that regard, you can make the argument there. They have the freedom to do whatever they do. But I'm going to argue more than that. I'm not just going to say that they have the right to overcharge. I'm going to say that it's actually a positive thing for the market and the economy with relation to obviously, consoles in this case, and in this case, Sony's market, why it's beneficial to have these scalpers. So, first and foremost, there is no escaping economics. Supply and demand are fundamental laws of the universe. And so, when you have high supply and low demand, prices lower and there tends to be surpluses. If you have low supply and high demand, there tends to be higher prices and shortages. That's all, the rule and laws of economics, the laws of supply and demand. And in my opinion, they're inarguable. So when you look at Sony releasing its consoles that have limited supply, right? They can only make so much of them. And so again, it's all relative, but in this case, it's relatively a limited supply. And in contrast with its demand, the demand way exceeds its supply, right? So Sony cannot make all the PS5s that can meet demand. They know that they're going to make, currently, they're going to make lower than what the demand asks for them. So in that case, we have a very low supply, very high demand, which what do the market forces do? The market forces are going to naturally bring prices up. Now, you might say, well, doesn't, the Sony have the say in what the prices are? No. The market has the say in what the prices are. Sony could choose to sell its console at a higher or lower price, but then it won't sell. Or it'll sell too much, right? If you set your price lower than the market price, your product will instantly get sold out. But if you sell your product above the market price, it's not going to sell. And so you're going to have surpluses. So either if you sell it below the market price, you get shortages or you just completely sell out. Or if you set your price above the market price, then you might, you're going to get surpluses or your thing might not even sell. So there is no escaping the market price. The market price is set externally by the market. Sony has no say in what its market price is. So in this case, the market price, which I will say from the start right now, is at around 1,200. It's whatever price these scalpers are asking for because it's they're selling it at these prices. So I mean, right, supply meets demand wherever a transaction occurs. That's the market price. So in this case, in the market, it's being sold for 1,200. Sony sold it way under market price. They sold this console for only 400. So they sold it beneath the market price. What does that tell you? Market forces dictate that there will be shortages or you just sell out. So, and that's what happened. Sony instantly sold out. All retailers sold out. They sold it way under a market price. And then you have these scalpers now who are reselling it for that market price because obviously there's a difference there. And so what the prices that these scalpers are asking for on eBay and just I guess all just you can consider the market as a whole because some people might be selling it elsewhere is $1,200. That's the price that it's being that they're asking for, and it's being sold at those prices, right? It's not like it's just sitting there and standing there. And the people who are reselling, many of these businesses, they're not completely ignorant, right? They have an idea of a sense of the market, so at the end of the day they want it sold, so they're gonna pick a price that they think it'll sell at, and it's selling. So you could check the listings. They're continuously selling. So there's actually a bunch of people who are willing to pay 1,200. So again, it's fair to say that the market price for the PS5 is at around 1,200, 1,300, 1,400 bucks. So this is not a negative because, as I said, there's no escaping the market price. The market tells you the value of the good or service that you're providing. I'm just going to stick to a product here because I'm referring to the PS5. So the market is always going to tell you what the value of the PS5 is. Nobody could say what the value is. The market determines the value. The populace, people as a collective, determine the value of a good or service. No one individual could say, I demand that this thing be valued at this price, right? That's not how value works. It's not how economics works. So people say, hey, these PS5s are valued at 400, but they're way overcharging overvalue for them. It's actually the other way around. It's the scalpers are charging you what the value is worth. How do you determine the value? Simply connect supply and demand. There's a really low supply relative to the extremely high demand, which will dictate, you could calculate it on an equation. How many people want to buy the PS5? How many is there in supply? And you can actually chart right there the price. And the way that the market works, the beauty of it is you don't really need to do all the calculations. You just look at the price that it's being selling at. And that's where supply and demand meet. That's where the price and the quantity meet. And that is at 1,200 bucks. So there's no escaping that. So these scalpers are actually charging you the value for the PS5. Sony, on the other hand, sold you it at a very steep discount. So, I mean, they're technically doing you a favor, Sony, by selling it at a discount. But again, there's no escaping the market price. And this is where I'm going to get into the consequences of selling things apart from the market price. And I think I've mentioned it before, right? If you sell below the market price, you're going to get shortages or you might just sell out. So what happens is when you sell something, obviously you're not discriminating. You're just selling it to whoever shows up first, or the process can be randomized, which is actually not fair because some people may want the good or product or service. In this case, again, I'm going to try to stick to product. In some cases, right, some people want the product more so than others. So they have sort of a higher, they're more obligated to, they have a higher right. I'm trying to word it in a better way, but they have more of a say in them acquiring that product versus someone who wants it, but who doesn't want it as much as the other person. So if the market price correctly allocates to the people who really want it, if the demand is really high and the quantity is really low, the market's going to say, all right, who really, really wants this product? Who is willing to sacrifice a lot of their saved up energy, right? In other words, their savings. Who's willing to save? Who's willing to sacrifice their savings, their hard-earned work, the previous work, for this good and service? And that's again reflected in the price. So if there's high demand, low supply, the market's going to allocate this limited, scarce good or service to people who really, really, really want it, who want to sacrifice a lot for that good or service. And so the price is going to increase because the market wants to only give this limited scarce quantity to those who really want it. And so when you try to circumvent that by selling it at a lower price, you're and again, when you're selling something, as I said, it's non-discriminatory. You're just selling it to random people. You don't care about if person A wants it more than person B, right? Even if person A wants it more than person B, because the process is random, person B might get selected and not person A. So you could see the problem in that now, right? You have a bunch of people who really want the product or service, in this case, who really want the console, that miss out simply by random, right? It's not like um it's discriminatory. So you have, if you try to sell below the market price, right? And this is also when when governments try to step in and try to arbitrarily lower the price, forcefully lower the price of things, you end up getting a shortage, or the thing sold sells out, and you have a bunch of other people who are probably willing to pay more for the good or service, right? There are people who get missed out from the market who are actually willing to pay more than some people who just got lucky and ended up getting the good or service, right? So there's let's assume right now we're in a world without scalpers, right? Let's say there are no scalpers. Let's say everybody who bought the PS5, and this is the argument that a lot of people try to make, only people who really want to play the PS5 should be able to buy it. Well, hello, there's obviously a larger number of that than do the ones than the supply than Sony's making. So there's still going to be a large chunk of people who really want to get the PS5 but aren't able to, simply because there isn't enough supply. And so because the process is random, you may get people who, again, don't really, they just got lucky, so they probably don't want it as much as the other person. Meanwhile, that other person really wanted it more so than the other person, but he just, was unlucky that day and didn't get a chance to get it. So this is the problem, right? The market correctly allocates for this because those people who really wanted more should be able to pay up more for it, right? If you want to show someone that you really want something, you should be able to sacrifice more, right? If there's two people that are thirsty, one is dying of thirst, the other one could use a glass of water, but he's not that thirsty, and I have one glass cup, and they're both yelling at me, "Hey, we want water, we want water." Who am I going to give it to? Well, I might say, who's willing to give me, who's willing to bake me 5 cakes? And if one person's like the one who obviously doesn't want who's not that thirsty, might say, yeah, it's not worth it. I'm not baking him 5 cakes. I'm not that thirsty after all. So, and they might walk away, and the person who is willing to bake me 5 cakes ends up getting the glass of water because he's willing to sacrifice more. So the market allocates these scarce goods, these scarce resources to people who are willing to sacrifice more. And when you circumvent that by charging below the market price, it ignores all that, right? It goes by random, and you have a bunch of people now that again, in a world where there's no scalpers, you have a bunch of people who miss out on the good or service, even though they're willing to pay more than their counterparts, than their than the other consumers who ended up not really wanting it but just getting lucky. And so that's not fair. Scalpers are sort of an attempt for the market to correct for this misallocation, for this mispricing, right? Because Sony undervalued their PS5, and meanwhile it's actually valued at this 1200. Scalpers sort of correct that, right? People see that there's a huge gap between the demand and the supply, and people see a huge gap between something that's undervalued and something that's overvalued, right? That's the whole idea of economics: buy low, sell high, right? They see something that has so much potential, has so much value, that it's being sold at a steep discount. It's very undervalued. It's actually worth this value, but it's only being sold. It's being sold for this way lower value. People see that and they correct for it. And this is part of how something goes to equilibrium, right? How supply meets demand. It's because people see that this thing is demanded way higher than the supply, and so the price corrects for it. So, I mean, the whole idea, supply and demand wouldn't work, right? The laws of economics wouldn't work if there aren't people who are willing to make supply meet demand, make the price equal the quantity. And so this is exactly what these scalpers are doing. They're essentially portraying to the public that this good or service, in this case the PS5, is way undervalued. And this is the correct value for it, right? If there were no scalpers, let's say scalpers were made illegal and we just, we had blindfolds on to scalpers, we wouldn't know the true value of the PS5, right? Sony could sell it, it could go out of stock instantly, but we wouldn't know what the value is. And of course, there's the other consequences where you have a bunch of people who are willing to pay more, miss out completely on the market just because they're unlucky. But what's actually unfair is for people who are willing to sacrifice less have the ability to get the console, and for the people who have the ability to pay up more lose that ability to get the console. So the market corrects. There's no escaping equilibrium. There's no escaping where supply meets demand, where price equals quantity. There's no escaping that. And in this case, the PS5 has been way undervalued by Sony, and by these scalpers coming into the market, they're allowing people who missed out to buy if they're willing to pay up front, who are willing to sacrifice more. Again, imagine there were no scalpers and everybody who bought the PS5 actually played it. They had no intention of reselling it. Well, you have a bunch of people who missed out. That's it. It's not like they missed out. All right, fine, let me go look for somebody else to buy it from. No, as I said, let's pretend there are no scalpers. There are no resellers. Everybody who bought the PS5 was willing to play, not willing to sell it and just play, be an average, gamer, right? Just have it in their room and playing it without any intention of selling it, of reselling it. That person is lucked out. And it's not, as I said, he can't go look for his friend. He's completely knocked out of the market. And so he loses the ability to buy it, even though he has that extra cash in his pocket. He's willing to sacrifice more than other people. So I think I've stretched out the point enough. Essentially, scalpers are good because it exposes that Sony has undervalued the PS5, right? The demand is way through the roof, supply is very low. And another problem really is now you could start questioning it. Again, I'm not saying that this is a good thing, right? Obviously, prices are high. High prices are not a good thing. The question is, why hasn't Sony been able to produce the amount to meet demand? This is now a negative for them. And it's a negative for the market because obviously the quantity, the supply is always limited. There is no increasing or decreasing the supply. The market forces can correct for this by bringing up the price, but at the end of the day, the supply is at that level. Now you could ask Sony, why weren't you able to make enough? Why weren't you able to make more? So I think instead of people focusing their anger on the scalpers, they should focus their anger on Sony, and probably even further than Sony, right? Sony wishes they could make as many PS5s as possible, right? I mean, if they're going to increase the profits, they wish they could have had supply meet demand. The question is, why didn't they? Now you could probably they're probably going to focus their anger and push the attention towards the regulations and government officials who have made it inefficient for them to actually produce the supply. And this is the problem, right? With government intervention, government regulations, government agencies, making it harder for businesses to actually produce the supply that is necessary to meet demand. Thanks for listening.